Okay, hi everybody. This is a little interactive video lecture I have for you guys on the Telltale Heart. I know it's a little bit spooky, but I hope you guys liked it. What I'm going to have you do to start is take out a sheet of paper and a writing utensil. I'm going to ask you some questions over the course of the video lecture, and I'll have you pause the video and write down your answers. Take as much time as you need, and then play once you're done writing. I'll be collecting these sheets with your answers to these questions next class. So make sure you're thoughtful here. I'm less interested in whether or not the answers to the questions are right and more interested in whether or not I can tell you put time and thought into them. So take out a sheet of paper, write your name on it, take out a writing utensil. Go ahead and pause the video now if you need a minute to do so, and then we'll talk about the Telltale Heart. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and put a number 1 on your sheet of paper, and then answer this question. Simply, what happens in the story? Summarize the story in your own words. What happens in the Telltale Heart? Take a minute, pause the video. I'll leave this question up. Be thorough and thoughtful in your answer, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, hopefully you were able to kind of answer this question. So let's talk about what happens a little bit. Basic plot arc. We have 2 characters, right? We have the narrator and we have the old man. The narrator seems to feel somehow disturbed, bothered, threatened by the old man, and decides that he's going to kill the old man. You guys with me? So he murders the old man. He cuts him up into little pieces. It's kind of gruesome. He hides him under the floorboards, and then the police show up because they heard the old man scream. The narrator invites them in. He says, yeah, please search the house. The old man's on vacation. Don't worry about it. Come, let's chat. The police go into the old man's bedroom, and the narrator seems to think he hears the heartbeat of the old man under the floorboards, and he loses it and confesses to killing the old man. We don't really know how these 2 men are related, if they're family members or if they just are like roommates. Maybe they are living together in a boarding house. We're not really sure how they're connected, but they're living in the same house. Okay, let's talk about the characters. The narrator and the old man are our 2 major characters here. So let's talk about these characters specifically. If you didn't talk about the characters in your summary, go ahead, pause the video, take a few seconds to make a list. How would you characterize the narrator, and how would you characterize the old man? Go ahead, pause the video, make your list of some character traits, and then we'll do it together. Okay, so let's talk about these characters here. The old man, if we're thinking about some of the things we talked about in terms of character types in the last few classes, we have dynamic, static, flat, round. The old man doesn't really change, right? He serves as sort of an object of the narrator's madness. So we would call him a static character if we're thinking about our character types. We don't know much else about the old man. He seems somewhat passive. He doesn't really undergo much change until he dies. But we do know he has this trait that seems to trigger the narrator, and that is his vulture eye, also called his evil eye. The narrator, we might characterize him as reactive. He reacts pretty dramatically to the old man's existence. We'll say dramatic. He is a dynamic character, right? If we're thinking about character types, he does kind of descend into madness, so he certainly changes over the course of this narrative. Dynamic character. I'm not sure I would call him a protagonist. He's kind of villainous. He might be an antagonist, anti-hero. And he is not necessarily, as we come to understand by the end of the text, a reliable source of information. He is what we would call an unreliable narrator. So in literature, if we're talking about narrative POV or narrative point of view, there are 2 kinds of narrators in terms of how we believe, trust, or understand the truth of the story. And those two kinds of narrators are a reliable narrator and an unreliable narrator. So a reliable narrator is a narrator whose account of the story's events is accurate and factual. We can believe what a reliable narrator says in their accounts of the story. An unreliable narrator is a narrator whose account of the story is not necessarily accurate, clear, trustworthy, or unbiased. So an unreliable narrator is a narrator that we literally can't rely on to recount the events of a story with accuracy, with reliability. In the Telltale Heart, we're looking, I think, at an unreliable narrator. It seems that this narrator is not someone we can trust to accurately portray what's really happening in this story. And there are some authorial choices that Edgar Allan Poe makes to reinforce the idea that we're looking at an unreliable narrator. So, go ahead and write a number 2 on your paper, and I want you to see if you can find some authorial choices that help to create this unreliable narrator. Remember, authorial choices are choices the author makes, any choice the author makes in their writing to achieve a certain effect. So stylistically, formally, word choice, structure, anything like that. So what are some authorial choices Edgar Allan Poe makes to help create this unreliable narrator here? A narrator that we can't trust to relay events factually. Go ahead, pause the video, take a couple minutes, and see if you can come up with some authorial choices. Okay, so a few that I notice. First, a lot of dramatic punctuation, and by that I mean mostly exclamation marks. This narrator, particularly right from the beginning, is using a lot of exclamation marks. It's true! Exclamation mark is the very first sentence, right? The second paragraph starts, listen! Exclamation mark. Listen and I will tell you how it happened. So dramatic punctuation is something we see right from the start. The second thing I notice is the invocation or the use of the you voice, the second person voice. We saw this in Omelos, right? The narrator addressed the you, the reader. Here we see this again, right in the first paragraph. But why do you say that I have lost control of my mind? Why do you say that I am mad? Can you not see that I have full control of my mind? Listen, listen, and I will tell you how it happened. So we see that you repeated. Another thing I notice is lots of questions. This narrator is asking questions of us. First paragraph, can you not see that I have full control of my mind? Question, right? Is it not clear that I am not mad? A question. And last, it seems that there's quite a bit of repetition here, particularly at the beginning, and that kind of helps to reinforce that this might be an unreliable narrator. Listen, listen, and I will tell you how it happened. So all of these are authorial choices that help to indicate that maybe this narrator might not be the most trustworthy. Okay, go ahead and write a number 3 on your paper. What I want you to do is find and write down a quote that indicates the narrator's motivation. What's motivating the narrator as a character in this text to kill the old man? Go ahead, pause the video now. Okay. I'm excited to see what you guys found here for these quotes. The one that I found is on the top of page 20. We get, and so I finally decided I had to kill the old man and close that eye forever. So this brings me to something I really want to talk about in this story, something that I think is central to this story, and that is the eye. It seems that the old man's eye is the predominant reason or motivating factor for the narrator to kill the old man. He calls it the vulture eye, the evil eye, and the eye seems to be the thing that spurs him to murder. He wants to close that eye forever. So we might say this eye is a symbol, right? It represents the thing that spurs the narrator to madness. This evil eye, this vulture eye, really imbues him with this fervor or fills him with this desire to kill the old man. It's also a repeated image, which, if you remember some of the literary elements that we talked about a few classes ago, a repeated image is also known as a motif. A repeated image, object, or idea. The eye in the telltale heart is definitely a motif. We see it brought up over and over again. It is a repeated image. And the way that Poe repeats the image in the text sort of mirrors the way that the narrator becomes obsessed with the eye, the way that it haunts him. So that's another kind of authorial choice that Poe is making here. All right, I'd love to do some close reading now. We're going to look at the ending. I have it here. I'm going to give it a read and then have you guys answer a couple questions about it. So this is the ending. I asked the policeman to come in. The cry, I said, was my own, in a dream. The old man, I said, was away. He had gone to visit a friend in the country. I took them through the whole house, telling them to search it all, to search well. I led them finally into the old man's bedroom. As if playing a game with them, I asked them to sit down and talk for a while. My easy, quiet manner made the policemen believe my story. So they sat talking with me in a friendly way. But although I answered them in the same way, I soon wished that they would go. My head hurt, and there was a strange sound in my ears. I talked more and faster. The sound became clearer, and still they sat and talked. Suddenly, I knew that the sound was not in my ears. It was not just inside my head. At that moment, I must have become quite white. I talked still faster and louder, and the sound too became louder. It was a quick, low, soft sound like the sound of a clock heard through a wall, a sound I knew well. Louder it became, and louder. Why did the men not go? Louder, louder. I stood up and walked quickly around the room. I pushed my chair across the floor to make more noise to cover that terrible sound. I talked even louder, and still the men sat and talked and smiled. Was it possible that they could not hear? No, they heard. I was certain of it. They knew. Now it was they who were playing a game with me. I was suffering more than I could bear from their smiles and from that sound. Louder, louder, louder. Suddenly I could bear it no longer. I pointed at the boards and cried, "Yes, yes, I killed him. Pull up the boards and you shall see. I killed him. But why does his heart not stop beating? Why does it not stop?" So in this passage, in this ending, we see the narrator is thinking he's hearing the heartbeat of the old man under the floorboards, right? He's chopped up the old man, put him under the floorboards, and he thinks he hears this heartbeat. So my question for you guys, and I'll go back to the passage in a second, but I'll leave the question up also for a second. Feel free to pause the video wherever is helpful for you. I want you to write down 4 on your paper and answer this question. What do you believe is actually happening at the end? What is the truth? What's really going on here with the police? What do they think or not think, in your opinion? What is actually going on in the narrator's head? So what do you believe is actually happening at the end? I'll go back to the passage, so you can either pause here on the question or pause on the passage. Okay, my last question for you guys. So write a 5 on your sheet and then take a few minutes to write your answer. I want you to go back to the beginning of this text. Are there aspects of the narrative that you believed on the first read that you now doubt? Based on our discussion of this text, based on what happens at the end, the escalation at the end, the revelation that this narrator might be going crazy, that maybe they're hearing this heartbeat, but that's actually a symbol of their guilt for committing this murder. Maybe it's all in their head. Based on what we know now, after reading through this story, are there aspects of the narrative that you believed on the first read? Are there things that the narrator said that you believed on the first read that maybe you don't believe now? Or, alternately, did you never believe the narrator? Did you always know that this was an unreliable narrator? And if so, why? Go ahead, pause the video, answer this question. All right, you guys. That is all I've got for the Telltale Heart. I hope you liked it, and we'll keep going with our short stories unit next class. Bye.